I want you to get together.
At first, I just thought people couldn't financially justify hiring a clown anymore, you know? Then I started blaming the media for portraying my people as bloodthirsty murderers, cult members, or man eating space aliens. Of course, the 2016 clown sightings didn't help. Ronald was the first to go. They just took him away. And we stayed silent. Because that's when the book appeared. What new form of clown bigotry was this, I thought? Hadn't my people suffered enough? My clown act was failing because people just weren't taking it seriously. And once they fired me from the circus, I tried suing them for funfair dismissal. My unicycle rusted, and my balls gathered dust. I used to make kids scream with laughter, you know. So much that I could see the tears of joy running down their faces. And then it just stopped. I was so upset that I started eating the banana cream pies instead of throwing them in people's faces. I gained so much weight that summer. I avoided it for a while, but the book's front cover was just so eye-catching, and it was so readily available on Amazon, that I gave in and finally read the thing. I didn't even know what the Nephilim were. Luckily, the author spent the first half of the book concisely explaining the biblical history to me in an easy-to-understand manner, so that wasn't really a problem for long. That's when I read the rest of the book and realized that being a clown is no joke.
All right, everybody. So I am here with Paul Stobbs, who has done some tremendous research and is one of my favorite frequent guests on a lot of podcasts I listen to, like Tinfoil Hat. My family thinks I'm crazy. And he has some insane research that has like really illuminated a lot of things for me. So yeah, welcome.
No, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So Paul has some of the most interesting research that I've like encountered within the sort of Christian conspiracy sort of realm. And the first one is something that when I first heard it, it was really kind of confusing and I didn't really understand where he was coming from. And it was that the Nephilim looked like clowns. And this is kind of like what you're sort of known for initially.
Yeah.
Do you want to give like a brief background on that and kind of let everyone know where you're coming from with that?
Sure, to try and give you the quick elevator pitch here as succinct and quickly as I possibly can, so give me about 10 minutes. I'm going to try and condense 8 years worth of work into 10 minutes for you.
Gotcha, okay.
But first off, the Nephilim look like clowns comes from the context of a biblical worldview, but primarily a conspiracy theorist, contrarian biblical worldview. So you don't hear stuff that I'm talking about in the churches, let's put it that way. This is mainly a part of a underground subculture you can find on YouTube. I run a YouTube channel called Understanding Conspiracy. So I am a Christian conspiracy theorist. That's what I am, first and foremost. And you'll find on my channel, I've been doing this for about 10 years. Since March of 2014, I've been covering anything and everything to do with the conspiracy world, but my focus did start to hone in on biblical history, the antediluvian age, spiritual warfare, demons, and one thing led to another over those years. And in 2016, I started developing a kind of like a thought form more than anything, an idea, a concept that the Nephilim, when they roamed the earth, which are now demons in disembodied spirit form, had clown-like features. And on the surface, I know that sounds absolutely insane, and even just to get to that point at all, you have to have gone through a lot of hoops, let's say, understanding what the Nephilim even are, for example. But if you're in that world, yeah, that's predominantly what I've become known for, the guy who has formulated the idea that the Nephilim had features inherited from their fiery, flying serpent angelic fathers when they mixed themselves with the daughters of Cain. And this goes to Genesis 6, where it says the sons of God took wives of the daughters of men and bore offspring. The same men became giants, men of renown, gods in a sense. And then if you follow the biblical narrative from that moment, it seems like they became the kings and rulers of a pre-flood world. They were worshipped and venerated as gods. They started eating people. And you find that kind of thing leaves a mark on the collective psyche of humanity. So my work predominantly has been trying to find all the cultures around the world, on every continent, in every country, in every village, and their folk traditions. And you find when you examine their folk traditions that they all have a common thread. They all dress in a certain style. They white the face up with some kind of chalk paint or ash. They add multicolored patterns or polka dots in many cases, or even a red nose with face paint. They wear very colourful clothing made of ribbons or tassels or jewels or something that makes the skin very colourful and vibrant. They add bells to themselves, so when they move and dance, they make a lot of noise, almost an ethereal sense. And when they shake themselves around, they wave around the multicoloured tassels everywhere. And they often wear a headdress which is red or gold in some way, made of reeds or feathers or whatever they can get their hands on. And this is pretty synonymous across all cultures, everywhere. Cultures that are separated by thousands of miles in ocean and land that should have no business dressing the same way. And what they're doing, and they'll tell you this, they're all doing the exact same thing. They are dressing a certain way to communicate with the spirits of what they call ancestors. But they don't mean ancestors as our English language defines the word ancestor. That's just the best word we have for it as a translation. What they really mean are the ancient gods and creators of their culture and civilization, the Nephilim, going all the way back to the antediluvian age. And they do it for the purpose of gaining power. So they communicate with the spirits by dressing like them, performing a ritual. They let the spirit into their body, and dressing like the thing makes an easier channel for that to happen. And then they let the spirit speak through them, and they also eat things, smoke things, drink things, so the spirit within them can feel the pleasure through their senses and enjoy that sacrifice they're making for them. And in return, they get strength, knowledge, power, information, whatever they please, really. And that's kind of the transactional deal of being possessed by the demon for power. And they do it by dressing a certain way. Now, by any Western standard, I noticed, well, they dress like clowns. They white the face up, red hair, red nose, multicolored clothing. That is the archetype of a Western clown. So my research started there initially, but as I started to do some real research into where we get the Western clown image from, I realised it's borrowed directly from the Rakshasas of India, which is their flavour of demon, man-eating giants, half serpent, half reptile-looking, monstrous clown-like creatures called the Rakshasas, and you find them adorning the temples of Thailand and India, anywhere where Hinduism has kind of made its route all the way across to Bali. But you'll find that they wear this war costume, which is very polka dot pattern, frilled, colourful, and that's what the first clown was dressed like in the 1800s. And I followed the history, and it turns out it was all Freemason initiated. The son of a very famous Freemason called Charles Dibdin took over the popular theatre of London in the 1800s. He dressed a very popular actor called Joseph Grimaldi, who was a wonderful stage performer and comedian, in this brand new costume that has never been seen before for the character of clown, which prior to this date was just a plain white rag, servant garbs. He played the servant of the rich man, nothing special, Elizabethan ruffled rags, and dressed in like a psychedelic multicolored fractal beast out of nowhere, completely removed from what it should be. You know, it's never been seen before, and from that day it became the industry standard. Everyone was enamored by this new costume. But you never find out in the historical record where he got his inspiration from until you actually do a bit of looking around and contextualize what was going on, and you realize, well, his father travelled to India quite a lot. His brother was a part of the East India Company. He was going to move to India, but he chickened out last minute because of bad weather and he couldn't set sail, and he decided to stay in England. But he knew India very well, and if you compare the costume worn by the first clown, Joseph Grimaldi, and you look at the Rakshasas of India that adorn these temples, it's the same costume. They even had the audacity to paint Joseph Grimaldi in the same handstand, head facing up, smiling position, wearing the same costume. as you often see that demon depicted, especially in the Bali region of Hinduism. It's known as the Kalasung Sang, or the upside down demon over there, and that's what they depicted Joseph Grimaldi doing, the exact same pose. Because that was the direct inspiration for the clown costume, just the Indian flavour of Nephilim. So there you go, and it was introduced by secret societies. Even prior to that, if you look at Harlequin, the first proto-clown coming out of the 1600s, he was modelled after the European flavour of the Nephilim, known as the Wild Man, which was a giant man-eating hairy beast with a club that roamed all the way through Europe. And he had a band of merry, smaller, lesser, monstrous, deformed humans that went around with him eating people. So it was a bit of a just our version, and that's what Harlequin was based on. And Harlequin was the first proto-clown. He was also the servant of the rich man, and Pedrolino was his other friend who was also the servant, and them two had a bit of a play of comedy off each other during these medieval shows, which came out of the Italian tradition of the Commedia dell'arte. So I've kind of very quickly summarised there all of my work, but if you read the book I've written on the thing, which is next to me here now, which I published 2 months ago, it brings all the receipts, it has all the references, it has all the historical documents. If you trace it all the way back, the clown has always been a representation of the demonic, going all the way through the Middle Ages to the 1800s. It's quite literally modelled after demons. There's no two ways about it. You can't mince this. You can't imagine another realm, or people can talk their way out of it, but the facts are the facts, and I've proved that is the case historically speaking. And the costume of a clown is not a joke. There's a reason it was injected into popular media of the time. It's because it's a tool used to channel the spirits of the disembodied Nephilim who looked like clowns. So you dress like the thing to channel the thing. That's the secret occult rule, which the occultic secret societies like Freemasonry knew quite well and injected into popular media to get more people emulating the costume and thinking it's just a bit of fun for the kids. They hid it under that nuanced layer of, it's just a bit of fun. It became a cult, hidden. But everywhere else around the world, it's not occulted. It's very well understood in these cultures. You dress this way to communicate with spirits. We just don't know that in the West, and that's the sneaky trick that was played on us in the 1800s. And you'll find the clown in modern media is everywhere, and the costume is still used today for that exact same purpose. You talked about the music industry and how your followers are very into that. Well, the secret to the industry I've learned is not to have talent. It's just to dress like a psychedelic fractaled clown monster, and you will be elevated. The spotlights will be put on you. You will become an idol because they want more people to emulate you and dress the same way. The more people they can get dressing up with pale white skin, red lipstick, red nose, red hair, the stronger channels they're creating everywhere for more of these spirits to readily come into our Western world. And they have to stay hidden because we're a predominantly Christian nation. The Anglosphere is predominantly Christian, which means when we see a demon, our first reaction is to call on Jesus Christ, and that's not very good for the demons. So they're not really a fan of that. They would prefer if they could be in people's vessels and use people for their own pleasures without them knowing that they're there. All these other cultures that dress this way, they know what they're doing, and the demons aren't worried about being caught out because these cultures aren't going to call on Christ at any moment, so they don't feel the need to be as hidden or occulted. But in the West, they have to stay hidden, and they have to find means to make us readily let them into our bodies, and the costume of a clown is just one of those tools. And like I said, it's utilized everywhere. Musicians who do make it incredibly large in the industry are likely channeling demons for skill, talent, power, and the rest. It's the same trick. There's a transaction at play here. So yeah, dressing like a clown, it's no joke. It's very serious, and secret societies are heavily involved in this from the very beginning, even today. The hierarchy of the secret societies goes basically blue lodges, like the police and military organizations, then Freemasonry above that, and then you have shrining above that. All Shriners, which is an Arabic-themed offshoot, supposedly, all dress like clowns. They have their own clown groups within shrining. They all own the circuses of today as well, pretty much in America. You might have the odd one or two that isn't Shriner-owned, but the big ones, the traveling circuses in America, all Shriner run. And you'll find a step above shrining, you can become a jester. It's called the Royal Order of the Jesters. And to be a member of this sick, perverted cult, you have to be invited only, and you have to be a high-level Shriner, so you have to have made your way through the entire craft to get to that point. And when you think, why is it the highest honor to be called a jester? Well, it makes no sense until you contextualize it with my research, and then it makes perfect sense. It's because it represents their gods that they're in communication with, and it's as though you're on par with them when you get labeled such a thing. And they are the most depraved creatures. They are quite literally demons, and they look like clowns. And a lot of this research also comes off the back of the psychedelic culture, and you'll find my book has a whole testimony of my own experience with psychedelics and my discovery of the jesters in the DMT realm. And you realize these jesters, so-called, are just the disembodied spirits of these Nephilim creatures that looked like clowns when they were walking around on Earth. They just look like jesters now in disembodied form on Earth, trapped just behind a matrix that we can't see. Because the fate of the Nephilim was that when they died, they couldn't leave the Earth. They're stuck here. They are made of the Earth and they'll be stuck on the Earth. They're not bound for heaven or anywhere. They're trapped here. But they have no body anymore. So when you take DMT and just slightly lift that veil and open your perceptions enough to perceive that weird dimension that's kind of here but not here, but it is a part of Earth but not a part of Earth. It's like the other side of the coin. I call it the plumbing of the universe, you know. When you go there and you see jesters, all you're seeing are the disembodied spirits of ancient giants that once did roam the Earth. But they will lie to you and tell you anything. So a lot of my work is trying to reach that community and to give them an alternative understanding for what they're playing with. A lot of them think it's just Jungian archetype reflections of the humanity's shadow, trying to teach them themselves about how to do the work to make themselves a better person or something. I'm saying that's pretentious nonsense. There's a historical reason these things are here, and they are separate from you, and they are not your friends. So yeah, there's a lot to go into, but there is my entire 8 years worth of research from a 44 episode series on my channel. You can go and watch with all the visuals condensed into one half here in the book. Volume 2's on its way in a year's time, but there's the entire thing in a nutshell in, I think, about roughly 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes.
Hey, that was great. That was great. So, you know, it's very interesting, the whole clown thing. And I talk about this a lot with the music industry, is like, my whole thing is they always make everything so subversive. And I feel like that is what is essentially the most problematic thing when it comes to sort of packaging these, you know, sort of satanic or dark elements of anything, right? Like, my go-to example is always like, if I'm listening to Black Sabbath, I know what I'm getting myself into. But especially with the clown thing, how it's like, oh, it's a thing for little kids. It's just a jester, which is funny because you're talking Jungian archetypes too, which is, I mean, the entire you know, like Satan himself is sort of like a trickster deity, right? The whole thing is he's a liar, right? Mm-hmm. So to even approach it from that angle of, it's just a clown, it's just a jester, it's just this silly little fun thing. But I mean, essentially that's like the root of everything that becomes problematic, because what you have is, even like the DMT, it's like, oh, we're doing this thing and we're just peeking into the other side. But it's like, no, they've created this like very subversive thing that is a doorway to something that is so dark and sinister that it completely consumes you by the time you've even known it. Just like clowns in general are such a cultural, you know, I guess kind of an archetype at this point now, right? Mm-hmm. Where when you look at a clown, most people get kind of freaked out. It's almost like a, you know, like some sort of innate instinct that they're kind of creepy, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just so interesting the way that they go about this in addition to everything else. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it's just how the occult work, and once you know the magic trick, you can't be fooled by it anymore. It's lost its oomph. And if you've been in the conspiracy world for long enough, you realize once you kind of see a symbol or a sign, you start seeing it everywhere, and you realize it's always been there, and they've always been showing you the truth about the situation everywhere, no matter where you go. And it's kind of funny because that's what this kind of research was. When I started doing this, I didn't think it would lead and be as obvious as it is. You know, I didn't realize it would be to the extent that I'd be able to write a 330-page book on the thing, and I'm only halfway through. I did not think it would be that extensive. I don't even care about clowns. It just kept coming. You know, the information just kept rolling, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, and there's something I like this research for the fact that it reaches an audience who kind of need the clown to have a hook or something that can bring them into starting to learn about the Bible properly and biblical history and spiritual warfare. And the clown seems to get people. Something about it draws them in, and that's great for me because I want to then hit them with the biblical perspective from an angle they've never even considered before, you know. And that's
which is
like.
great. It's so great you say that because, you know, I even sort of synchronistically with you said that it's like a doorway, the clown, right? Like it's like something about it. And it's interesting you say that because so me personally, I had like a near death experience. I was like a really bad drug and alcoholic, really bad. And I had a heart attack and I like basically met Christ, and I've been sober ever since. Went to rehab, all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And through my sobriety, I was listening to Tinfoil Hat, which I've been a listener for since it started, literally. And your episode, it's funny, it caught me. The clown thing really caught me for some reason. And the way you were talking about Genesis 6 and the stuff with the Book of Enoch is as far as like the creation of the chimeras and how the seraphim and everything mated with the daughters of Cain, like you're saying, and the way you painted that picture completely changed the way that I viewed Christianity because I had this direct visceral experience with like literally heaven. Like I literally saw everything, right? But then you explained it in this way where it's like, and I think Sam said something similar where it's like, oh, this is like the greatest story ever. Like it's like, and it's real. The way that you explain it, it makes sense and it's so grounded, but it's so, the loftiness is grounded in a way in which you're able to portray it in such a real way with something that is so abstract. It's just insane. Like it really captured me. Oh. So it's funny that you say that it's like it catches people.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad you got that from one of my honestly, I left that Sam Tripoli podcast and at the end of it I was like, damn it, I didn't say enough. I messed that up. I thought I messed that one up, you know, because you only have so much time to say everything, and I tried to. And obviously Sam, you know what he's like, he's a comedian, so he was throwing in those jokes every now and then, and he was like sidetracking off one random thing to another, you know. But I was trying to always bring it back to teach him, okay, so do you understand the biblical narrative as so called? And I don't actually think he did. I don't think anyone's ever really explained that to him quite like I did in a sense. And I'm not saying anything that I came up with. I'm just reading the Bible and the extra biblical text, and I'm just relaying the information that's available. And a lot of my work is based on a work by someone called Gary Wayne. He wrote this book here called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. You can just kind of see it there. And, you know, I reference his work quite a lot in mine because I think he does a fantastic job of just laying it out, you know, just what happened from start to finish, you know. And there's a lot of other researchers throughout the last decade who have really helped me crystallize this narrative, this story. And I was like a lot like you. I wasn't raised a Christian. I was in the drug world. I was completely atheistic, Gnostic, New Age, spiritualist, if anything, you know, kind of trying to find answers and looking anywhere and everywhere but God himself for those answers, looking in the world and within myself or all these type of things. You know, there was a short period of time, I think, where I thought, well, I'm just God who's pretending not to be God. And we're all God who's just collectively forgot that for fun, you know, because we're all source consciousness, that kind of thinking, but that led to nothing good, nothing fruitful. And I had to break down after learning all this truth and kind of ask God sincerely to show me the truth, and he provides. It's very visceral, it's very real, you know, it's a real, tangible, transformative experience. I'm sure it sounds like you understand as well. And I was lucky to convey that to such a wide audience on Tinfoil Hat, and since then the podcast visits have just been flying in because, like I said, something about the clown, it just kind of got people, it got them to listen to the Bible for the first time in a way that they've just never kind of thought they could, and that's wonderful. And the Nephilim is a fascinating subject. It really is, you know. I mean, and to say that I like clowns as well, I guess, really does viscerally remind people, maybe on a subconscious level, it's like you don't forget when you were prey to a predator. I think collectively humanity remembers being eaten by something that was hideous, you know, and terrifying to behold and looked like a clown. And maybe it did leave a generational psychological marker in our DNA that we just instinctively, when you see something that looks like that, you just think run, because they used to eat us. They used to be predators, you know. And Just like the same reaction to snakes and spiders, because they killed us. Many people have died to snake and spider bites throughout the millennia. And it's in us. We know it instinctively. Bright colors, danger. It's there, and it's universal across all animals. And these things were the craziest, most psychedelic reptilian human hybrid monsters you've ever seen. If you break down a clown, the big wide mouth, that's a serpent mouth. That's snakes have very wide maws. They can dislocate their jaws to eat their prey. That's probably likely. If you're half dragon, you've also inherited the same wide grin, but with a human twist, with red lips. Imagine that. Reptiles don't traditionally have lips, but humans do. Mash those two things together, you get something that looks like this. Absolutely terrifying to behold. And it's not like they're actually smiling. It's just that when you see them from the front, it looks like a big grin. You know what I mean? It's just creepy. And the big, bulging, serpentine eyes, probably with the slit, which again is a predator trait. Clown makeup always has the slit going down the eyes, and big, bulging eyes, high brow ridges get painted on and shaded in blue or something. So when the clown closes his eyes, it looks like he has giant alien eyes, because that's the feature the Nephilim would have had. The red hair is always a common descriptor. Anywhere giants have been described throughout history, they always have fiery, blood red hair. I'm not talking ginger, not orange, red. Like red as red crayon, Crayola red hair, just like a clown wig, let's say. And they always, I don't know. What else we got? The big red nose, very common feature on a clown. Well, incredibly pale skinned people, even today humans, get what's called a rhinophyma. It's called the curse of the Celts, and it's a genetic condition which the Nephilim likely had by virtue of their incredibly pale skin. Vampiric, white, deathly skin, and that's inherited from the daughters of Cain. And there's some extra biblical books out there called the Book of Cain and Leviathan. It basically talks about how the mark of Cain was white skin. And if it's the daughters of Cain who mated with the serpentine rebellious angels, then they would have picked up that white skin porcelain base with a multicolored serpentine patterned layer on top of it. And that seems to be what these things are depicted as all throughout every culture, and what these tribes are trying to dress themselves to look like when channeling the spirits. As white as possible with multicolored patterns all over the skin. So predominantly white face, multicolored body. And that's a clown. These are all clownish features. And a rhinophyma, like I said, over the years, it develops into a giant big red bulbous ball on the end of the nose. And it's a predominantly pale-skinned problem. It's a genetic condition pale things have. It's a predominantly white person problem today, and it's likely they also develop the same conditions. So it can all kind of infer and reference back to the costume is just a caricature of Nephilim features. Big gloves, giant hands because they're giants. Big shoes because they're giants walking around with massive feet. It's walking around on stilts to emulate being incredibly tall because they're supposed to represent giants, tiny hats, tiny umbrellas or something like that, tiny cars. And they've got many of them in there. A car, symbolically in a dream, represents the human body. When a car breaks down, if you dream of a car breaking down, you're dreaming about your body being incapable of moving you through the world how you would want it to. Usually when you're ill, you have that kind of dream, or break a leg or something, you have that kind of dream. To symbolically have a bunch of clowns coming out of a tiny car is very reminiscent of a legion or many demons possessing a human body, symbolically speaking. And the circus, the whole thing about a circus is, like I said, it's all orchestrated and created by secret societies who know these things and communicate with demons regularly, are in cahoots with them, in agenda with them. Well, let's break down a circus. You have the ringleader, the Lord of the Ring Master, who wears a black top hat, yes. Okay, so let's look at a Freemason lodge. You have the worshipful Grand Master, who runs the rituals of a lodge. He is the head of the lodge, the only member allowed to wear a black top hat. So they tell you on any website, they'll openly tell you what the black hat symbolizes to them. It's the crown of Solomon. He represents the King Solomon, the builder of the temple. And how did Solomon build his temple? By using a magic ring given to him by the angels that helped him control demons. So he used the demons, which are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim, to help him build his temple. So the ringmaster of a circus controls the ring and orchestrates the clowns to create the performance. So it's the same as King Solomon using his ring to orchestrate the demons to build his temple. A circus ritual is just an analog of Freemasonic rituals. The Freemasons were obsessed with Solomon. All the early, it's all in the book, but all the early first circuses all did big extravaganza shows all together as one. 10 circuses combined, all run by Freemasons. Every set designed by Freemason-run companies. All the artwork by Freemasons. Everything Freemason affiliated. A giant show called King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And they said it straight away what they're doing here. They're transferring lodge ritual, satanic rituals, onto the big stage publicly, but have hidden it under a layer of nuance. It's just a bit of fun for the family and the kids. So now they've got the public on a regular basis. When the circus comes to town, everybody goes in that day. What else were you going to do, you know? Getting involved with giant invocation rituals with people running around dressed like clowns, so dressed like demons, summoning demons in a giant ring with the Solomon analog symbolic with the crown in the center. You know, so they've always been doing this, is what I'm saying, and the public have just been completely oblivious to the symbolism. They don't understand the language of symbols. You're lost. And I've just uncovered a symbol. The clown, the Western clown, is just a symbol. It's been occulted, and now the truth is out. So there you go.
See, it's so interesting too, because this is exactly what I talk about with the music industry. It is no one really understands like where these musicians are coming from. Like people don't know like the biblical history, especially like within the Abrahamic world, right? We're European country essentially, not entirely, you know what I mean, though. We're a Western country, so a lot of our stuff is coming from that angle. And it's like the Levites were like the music priestly class, like they were essentially all musicians. So a lot of stuff goes through the music industry as well. And like you're saying with the circus, how it's subverted in this way of like bringing Masonic rituals to the masses through the guise of this like family friendly thing. I mean, it's the exact same thing with the music industry. And it's interesting too, because you're talking about like the way the clowns are dressed and everything, and how it symbolizes this thing. I've been noticing this trend with musicians lately, and it's like everyone has a mask, or everybody is this character. Like no one has like a first last name, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no, it's almost like human artists. They're all these characters who are like, I don't know, it's just a very interesting thing. And I'm curious as to like what these people and musicians are channeling when they're doing that, because it sounds a lot like sort of what you're describing, right? It's like, you know, I don't know, like just an example would be like MF Doom, you know, who's this like rapper who plays this character that's like a Marvel character and all this stuff. And it's like, it's just so crazy the way that the things that are being presented and channeled have such rich histories that most people are just completely unaware of. But then, like you're saying, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So you know what I mean? It's just so, it's so crazy.
The music industry is a great example for this theory, because especially the 80s are a good time to start because of glam rock fashion and this type of idea. Bands like Kiss, for example, you know, are basically dressing the same way as, let's say, an African tribe. Like I don't know, or let's go into the deep Amazon basin and find a random tribe there. You know, they're doing the same thing: black and white fractal line patterned psychedelic imagery, sticking the tongue out, all of that kind of stuff. You'll find it's quite commonplace in these folk traditional tribes who are venerating and channeling spirits. So when you see bands like Kiss doing it, you now have a context for why they're dressing like that. It's not because it's edgy or to be cool, because it's a bit of fun. It's practical. It's more practical than anything, and they're gaining something from it. They said it involves channeling, so it's hardly surprising a lot of these artists have alter egos, you know. And a lot of it comes with trauma, split personality. I think a lot of people we see just come out of nowhere and are suddenly famous and in the charts, and you've just been told, this is good music, that's why it's here, and you just go along with it and believe it. They've been designed in a lab, practically, these people, from start to finish. They're probably mentally broken people who are being controlled with handlers to send a certain message out there in the programming, you know, and they're not actually there's no grassroots organic musicians really in the charts. It's hard to imagine that's the case. I think it's all orchestrated. The music industry is in the business of idol creation. they're creating gods, they're creating idols for people to emulate and follow and worship over the creator. That's the industry of music. That's all it's ever been in industry form. There's always been musicians which are just creating good music because they love music. I used to be one of them. I've been, and I'm sure you are. There are good musicians out there, but if you're in the charts, no, that's not what's going on there. That's a different game,
I'm so glad you're saying that, because that's like what I repeat ad nauseum, and I'm sure like some of my listeners are like, dude, okay, we get it. But I mean, that's all this entire thing is. And like you said, no one is there by happenstance, and they do have handlers. I cover this artist this week whose mother she started a label. She found like Skrillex and The Weeknd and all this stuff, and her son is now famous. But it's like this kid was literally bred and like indoctrinated into this sort of like hermetic mysticism that is like extremely occult and all this stuff. And I almost feel bad for the kid, because it's like he doesn't even really know what he's doing. And I had someone who like worked with him on to talk to him and everything. And it's crazy to see this in every single facet of everything, always, I say every time, it's every time, like it's just everything. And even to something as seemingly innocuous as, the archetype of the clown or the jester or whatever. We have about 3 minutes left here, so we kind of jammed through that really quick. You also talk a lot about how, and I don't know if this is something you believe, but you've discussed the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and how there's a potentiality that he actually already returned and he already had his full millennia reign and all of this stuff. Yeah. And if you want to just jump into that real quick, and maybe we could have you back another time.
Quick.
I would love that. Just super quick. It's just something I loved when you talk about it. So it's just great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can't do it quickly, unfortunately, but basically to summarize it in a sentence, the premise is most people today are waiting for Christ to return for his second coming. They believe he ascended into heaven and is promised to return to bring judgment, tribulation to his enemies, and then establish a 1,000-year reign, and then a new heaven and earth after that 1,000-year reign's over. And there'll be people who get to be resurrected in the first resurrection, who will be known as the saints, who get to rule with Christ for those initial 1,000 years. Everyone's still waiting for tribulation. We're waiting for Christ to come back, and that's called the futurist doctrine predominantly, and it's been mixed in with some kind of modern dispensationalist, Israel is the chosen people type ideology. What I'm saying is, I think a lot of it's been made up. I think we're living in a very complex time known in the Bible as the little season, which comes after the millennial reign. So what I'm positing is, while our attention is being led by the media to believe Christ is about to return at any minute, the truth is we missed it. It's already happened, and we're now in the time after the millennial kingdom, which is known as Satan's little season. And that's where he gets to rule for a short time, deceive all the nations, gather a big army, and then go attack what's known as the camp of saints, which is basically where Jesus is on earth somewhere with his saints who receded after the millennial reign ended. And that's it summarized. And a lot of people hate the idea, but it's one of those other things, like once you see it, you can't kind of really unsee it, and it starts to make a lot of sense of the conspiracy stuff. It's very contentious. The theory is not going away whether I talk about it or not, and this is one of those big game changer theories that I've been covering a lot on my channel, next to the Nephilim clown stuff. Like I said, I cover a lot of things. I even cover the music industry quite a lot on my channel. Like I've got a whole series which I want to continue called "Is Lucifer Singing to You?", where there seems to be this common theme where a lot of lyrics are written as though Lucifer is quite literally voicing his opinion to you through lyric form through these artists, and this millennial reign stuff is just one of many topics I like to discuss, but it's a hot one right now, and yeah, I'm on it. I'm on that one, so, but I need like 3 hours to fully flesh that out and explain
awesome.
Myself, because just what I've said there has probably infuriated 80% of your Christian audience, and they're now calling me a heretic and blasphemous, an idiot who just clearly hasn't read his Bible, and is kind of, no, I've got one right here. Here it is. The King
Right.
James.
No,
I've written
my
book,
audience is
it's kind of
they're super great. They're open to everything. They'll love it. But what we'll do, if you're down, we'd love to have you back on. I'll go ahead and link all of your stuff. Is there anything that you'd like to shout out real quick in this last minute or so?
Yeah, if you want to get a copy of The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, which is here, it's on Amazon. Just type it in and you cannot miss it. Clearly, it's quite obvious what it looks like. And go check out the book if you want more of the juicy details for the overarching image I just gave you today. If you don't want to read the book, you can get all the information for free with visuals by watching my 44 episode series called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, which has spanned over 8 years. It's on my YouTube channel under playlist, so go there and subscribe to me on YouTube if you want to hear more about every other thing I talk about as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. You have a good one, man. I appreciate you.
Are you tired of the same old conversations? Do you often find yourself struggling to know what to say? Are you over discussing the news, sports ball, or the weather? It's time to put boring discussions behind you by leaving a copy of The Nephilim Look Like Clowns on your coffee table, your toilet, your local library, mother's car, boss's office desk, or that person you really like's bed instead.
What the hell is this?
Oh, that? Why, it's just a book about how the modern costume of a clown is a caricature of ancient giants and modern demons.
Stay away from my children.
This is a conversation you can't wait to have. My family used to think I was crazy, but thanks to The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, they know I'm crazy. The Nephilim Looks Like Clowns. It's no laughing matter.
I want you to get together.